Joining us now from Inverness is the Labour MSP Rhoda Grant, whose members' bill would make it illegal to pay for sex. And here in the studio is the sex workers' rights campaigner, Laura Lee. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us this evening. Rhoda Grant, you say this consultation has produced 80% support for your bill. But how representative are those respondents of the whole of society?
I think I'm very pleased with the response that's come in. I think it's come from a broad range of people, organisations as well, those who buy sex, those who are prostituted, those who have come out of prostitution, as well as a lot of the agencies that work with them and a lot of individuals as well.
Laura Lee, 80% support. There seems to be public support for a change in the law.
I believe the reason behind that is because there's a lack of public knowledge about the realities of the prostitution industry, actually. The women that Rhoda is purporting to protect, she would move towards street sex workers that are drug addicted and labouring under poverty. They form a tiny minority of a very large and very diverse industry, in fact between 5 and 20%. In actual fact, right now there are 80,000 sex workers in the UK, most of whom have made an informed choice to enter into the industry and pay taxes. And
you are a sex worker yourself, so you know what you're talking about,
yes.
And that's what your colleagues in the industry are saying to you.
That's right. I've been out on the campaign trail around the various saunas in Edinburgh and working flats, and I've been talking to the sex workers therein, and they're angry actually that their source of income for providing for their children is now in doubt.
Rhoda Grant, Laura Lee says that from the women she's speaking to, that they are angry at what you're trying to do. You're jeopardising their income.
Well, the difficulty for people who are prostituted at the moment is that they don't have a lot of options, and I can understand their concern, because you don't choose to be prostituted, you don't choose to sell sex. You're really between a rock and a hard place when you do that, and you're facing poverty, some people drug addictions, abuse and the like, that take people into this industry. And unlike what Laura's saying, it's actually the vast majority that are in there due to coercion of some sort, and I count poverty as coercion, that aren't there for choice. And if they had real choices, they wouldn't be there at all. But I can understand their concerns. When you don't have a lot of choices, then obviously the one source of income you have is something that you are concerned about. But that should not be an option in a modern Scotland.
Okay. Rhoda Grant saying the vast majority are there not of their own free will.
OK, that's fundamentally untrue. I have 20 years' experience in the sex industry, and I have met a lot of sex workers from a lot of different backgrounds who operate in very different methods too. And they have made the choice to enter the sex industry for various different reasons, perhaps to fund their way through university, to support their children as well. You know, to paint us as women who are prostituted and who cannot make these decisions for ourselves is dreadful. These are some of the strongest, most independent women you'll meet.
Rhoda Grant, you talk about following the Swedish model. What is that?
The Swedish model has been really successful. What they've done is changed the onus, and our society very much blames the women and men as well who are prostituted, but yet encourages the men who buy to do this and says it's okay as a society for them. Sweden has turned that on its head. It has decriminalised the prostitutes but criminalised the purchasers, and that's had a big impact on their society, not only helping those who would have been prostituted but also the wider society, in that it has built respect and said to people that equality is really important and people should not be for sale.
But Rhoda Grant, there's been 2,000 arrests, only 2 convictions. No one's gone to jail since this law's been introduced. Has it truly been successful?
Well, I would say that's successful because it's been a deterrent and people haven't gone down that road. And I really hope that if we do the same in Scotland, it will prove the same kind of deterrent. And if you look just at the statistics in Sweden, you know, trafficking is up in every country. Indoor sex sale is up in every country. That has not happened in Sweden. They've actually tackled this and made a difference. So it's actually taking that away from society and giving people people real choices that are not involved in a trade of human beings.
Is that not an example to follow, Laura Lee, in Sweden?
There's absolutely no evidence actually to suggest that the Swedish model has been successful in its aims. What it has done is it has driven a further wedge between sex workers and the police, so that they're now in fear of going forward and reporting attacks because they'll draw attention to their clients. There's no evidence whatsoever that's come that the Swedish model has been successful at all, and in fact the World Health Organization have called for complete decriminalisation because we are potentially sitting on an AIDS epidemic. That's how serious this is.
Rhoda Grant, prostitution isn't called the oldest profession for nothing. Clearly there is a demand for it. If you criminalise the demand for it, are you not going to drive the whole industry underground and make women even more vulnerable?
Well, no, because it exists because people have to find it, buyers have to find it. So therefore, if a buyer can find it, so can the police, so can authorities, and so can the people that help women out of prostitution. So no, it can't drive it underground. If it drives it underground, the law actually succeeds by making it impossible to find, and therefore it disappears of its own free will to an extent.
What would you...
Okay, if we take the lower strata of the sex industry, to use an abominable term, so we look, for example, at the Edinburgh street scene where there was a tolerance zone until relatively recently. The girls were quite safe there, and in fact they worked in conjunction with the police rather than against them. Now that that's been taken away and soliciting is an offence, what you find is that they work further back into the shadows, away from help. Now, these are the vulnerable women that Rhoda is looking towards to protect. And I say that, as a society, shouldn't we be looking at the causes, such as poverty and drug addiction, rather than prostitution in itself?
Rhoda Grant, these women are going to step further back into the shadows.
The groups that deal and support women follow them into the shadows. I mean, they are quite clear that they will support them and find them wherever they are. But I agree with Laura in that we need to deal with poverty, we need to deal with addictions, we need to deal with all the issues that drive people into prostitution, because as a society we shouldn't be leaving people with only those options.
And Rhoda Grant, what kind of parliamentary support have you got for the bill?
I have a fair amount of parliamentary support. I need to get support from 3 parties. I have support from 2 parties at the moment, and I have more than the required 18 signatures. So I have a fair amount of support within the Parliament. I obviously haven't had a chance.
What percentage of support, though? You've got 80% consultation support. What about within the Parliament?
I haven't done a poll within the Parliament, so I'm not exactly sure. But what I'm required to provide for a bill to be drafted is 18 MSP signatures from 3 different parties.
What would you like to see done to protect these vulnerable women then, if you don't want to change in this law?
Well, we know, because history has shown us, that whenever prohibition comes in, criminality thrives. It's as simple as that. You only have to look at the prohibition of alcohol in the US, and history has shown us that. What I would like to see is a working group involving border agencies, police and sex workers, so that we can proactively go after and protect these women who do need our help.
Rhoda, Laura,
that
both...
actually...
Okay, final word to you, Rhoda. On you go. Yes, of course.
Amsterdam have legalised prostitution, have licensed it. There are actually more women working unlicensed, more organised crime. Okay. It doesn't work. Okay. We really need to do something about the purchasers.
Rhoda Grant, Laura Lee, thank you both very much indeed for joining us.